And good morning, everyone. I hope you're all having a great day and welcome to Drupal GovCon 2021. My name is Paola Garcia, Cardenas, and I am a cybersecurity analyst at Pixel. So let's get to it. The agenda for today, I'll talk a little bit about me, then about Pixel, which is where I'm working currently. We'll look at the main takeaways presentation, and then we'll briefly review what is the Executive Order 14028, which would then lead us into the Secure Software Development Framework, or SSDF. Um, we're going to make a little bit of a connection why we talk about SSDF, Drupal, and OWASP ZAP. And then finally, we'll quickly look at the advantages of using a tool such as OWASP ZAP. In this case, it's called ZAP Attack Proxy. The advantages are looking at this, at working with it locally before we actually jump into our demo. So about me, I am a cybersecurity analyst at Pixel. I've been a web developer since around 2012 after I graduated from with my bachelor's in computer science. But I didn't start working with Drupal until about 3 years later in 2015. When I started then, I was a little bit more into like the administrative tasks of Drupal. And, um, and then I started to get more into development and I've been doing a bit of like backend and front end. Um, Started transitioning into cybersecurity in the fall of 2018, and I am fully now transitioned into this cybersecurity role. I'm also an adjunct professor at NYU. I teach graduate level cybersecurity courses there, and I just started this year actually at NYU, and I'm also a computer science adjunct at St. Thomas Aquinas College um, in New York as well. So Pixel, we are an organization that we actually live by, like, we like to improve people's lives through human-centered strategies. We do partner with leading federal agencies such as HHS, DEA, and USA, and we work with a variety of tools. However, Drupal is actually at the center of our technology stack. And one of the projects I recently worked in, which was cybersecurity related and really, really interesting, it's the Digital Apex USA Colombia project, and I actually got like a ton of insight. And although we didn't quite use Drupal, we actually use a lot of other tools around cybersecurity. And so it was a really interesting project that actually we are trying to get more and more into cybersecurity at our company. So some of the main takeaways for this presentation, it's going to be an introductory overview. So we're not going to go into like too technical. It's not going to be like hard to understand. I'll try to make it just as simple as possible. And I would like to or my hope for this presentation is to actually be able to answer the questions such as why cybersecurity should be an integral part of our new features development planning, what are some of the best practices to implement when we create digital experiences, and what tools can be used to help us audit cybersecurity on websites, and how can this help your ATO process, which is the authorization to operate when it comes to federal websites. So with that being said, let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about the executive order. This is EEO. It's short for executive order, and we're talking about executive order 14028. This was issued just recently, May 2021. If you are familiar with cybersecurity, it's been in the spotlight since the beginning of the year. There were a lot of cyber attack incidents that happened that led the government to issue this executive order, right? So there's a section 4 in this order that actually directs the NIST organization to solicit input from the federal government. And they want this input from private sector, academia, and any other that can identify anything that exists or that they can develop new standards and tools and best practices and any other guidelines that to actually enhance the software supply chain security. So NIST has as draft, that's a special publication, which is SP 800-218. So this publication is right now actually in draft, and it is called the Secure Software Development Framework, or SSDF. Right now it's version 1.1, and it's out for public comment through the all the way up until November 5th. So it's actually like we're right on time right now. If you have not checked it out and you're into security and you would like to help, this is a good time to check it out and to also provide your feedback, because that's what they're looking for. There are submissions right now that they're taking at ssdf@nist.gov. So I'll definitely recommend if this is part of what you do and you can collaborate. But really important, and why we talk about it is because we are Drupalists, right? We work with Drupal technologies. Some of the government sites that we work with, most of them, we work with Drupal. So we have to start implementing all of these secure practices. And so one of the best things to do is to kind of follow the lead of the industry and like some entities like the NIST. So this lead us to the Secure Software Development Framework, which is SSDF. This framework does not introduce any new practices, or it doesn't define any terminology, and nothing that is new. Instead, it's actually going to describe a set of recommended high-level practices. And they're going to be based on established standards that are already there, right? Guidance and any secure software development practices that are documented already. So it is actually intended to help the target audiences achieve secure software development objectives, and it focuses on the outcomes of the practices rather than the tools and any techniques or mechanisms. So just the outcomes. And regardless of the technology stack, it can be used by all organizations. So the reason why I bring it up is because, right, the executive order happens, then the government asks NIST for collaboration, NIST comes out and creates this framework, SSDF, and actually asks the public, private sector, everyone for help. And so we come in, we start helping build this document in its entirety. So this comes into play, we start integrating this into our practices, and that's how, in my opinion, I think we will, and we'll get to that, but that's how we can start implementing all of these practices and actually make security part of the entire process from beginning to end. This framework actually uses what is called a common language that's going to help facilitate communications among internal and external organization stakeholders. So they actually use something called practices. And just to give you a brief overview, I won't get into too much detail, but it is good to understand it. And so I do encourage everyone to actually go check it out on the NIST.gov website. But they use practices and they put them into 4 groups. They use one called Prepare the Organization, or PO, Protect the Software, or PS, Produce Well-Secured Software, or PW, and Respond to Vulnerabilities, RV. So with that being said, as developers, we're all working with Drupal already, right? The earlier we adopt a set of secure software development practices, such as the NIST SSD framework, is the better. So we will also be already a step ahead in terms of compliance. So when it comes time to, like, if there's an audit, for example, or a process such as an ATO, the easier it will be for us to become fully compliant because we have already started to implement these practices. Overall, it will help improving the impact level and the health of the systems or systems that you have, right? Any system or systems. So I believe OWASP ZAP is one of the best web application scanners out there, that whether it's QA engineers and even the developers themselves alike can adopt in the process. And one of the benefits of using this locally is to immediately avoid the complicated process of like writing things like ROEs. An ROE is like a request of, it's a document, right? Like we have to ask for permissions to use systems. We set boundaries. And so like all these ROEs documents, they become kind of complicated. the process of signing, like it has to go to the higher ups. We need to request information. We need to ask to test environments. So sometimes we'll have like the development environment or the staging environment. There's even has to be testing in productions environments if needed, right? So this process takes time. But if we use something like OWASP ZAP locally, we're actually already a step ahead, right? Like if our developers install this tool, they could go in, check things out here and there, perform certain scanners, create some reports, whether it is, like I said, QA engineer or developers, then we are actually a step ahead to when this process is actually approved, right? Then we can go ahead and do the actual scanning to all of our live systems. But so this is just kind of like giving us a step ahead. So the OWASP ZAP attack proxy, so that's the name, that's what ZAP stands for. It's an actual web application scanner. It actually scans for web vulnerabilities. And it doesn't just apply to Drupal, so it will apply to any web application. But again, because it's a tool that you can install locally, you can definitely use it for your Drupal applications. It is maintained under the OWASP umbrella. It is free, open source, easy to set up and use. It is available for major OS systems as well as Docker. And then there's also additional add-ons available in it's called the ZAP Marketplace. So if there are functionalities that may not come with the OS ZAP itself, then you can actually try to go to the marketplace and even find other functionality that's out there. It can be automated. So once you get to a step where you start learning to use the tool, you actually perform some testing. You can start trying to incorporate this into your automation process, and it can be fully controlled via an API. So it is almost like a no-brainer, right? Because it's free, you can use it with all of your applications. In this case, your Drupal local environments. All right, so we are going to jump into a demo. I know we had about 30 minutes, so I wanted to have some time for the demo. The versions I'm going to be using, it's at ZAP 2.11.0, which is actually the latest version of ZAP. And also I'm using Drupal 9.2.7. So this is, we're kind of like, we're not going to be going over any of the installation of these tools. I'm going to just think of it as, okay, ZAP is already being installed locally and Drupal has already been installed locally. I will be providing some extra resources and material so that you can get to the links for downloading the tool and information about all of the topics we just talked about. But the main thing that I'm going to be running here for the demo, it's actually learn to not do the demo live. So I did pre-record it, and so I'll be talking through it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me and ask. So let me first exit here, and let's bring that up. Okay, so let me make this full screen. So I recorded this on my local, right? I am going to start it. When you first open the ZAP tool, so you have installed the ZAP tool, you're gonna see this screen is just loading. You'll get the version of your tool. This is your welcome screen. It actually first comes up with this little box here. Is gonna ask you, what do you want to do with your ZAP session? Now, I should warn you, right? Like persisting the sessions, depending on the storage, could sometimes, it becomes, depending on the size of your sites, size of your applications, this could become sometimes a little bit like heavy in size. So do be careful. And at the beginning, what I would recommend is to not persist the sessions. So in this case, this option, you do not want to persist it. You're just kind of testing around. So start with like exploring the tool and then go from there, right? So at the beginning, do not persist the session. There are ways to persist it, and you have a couple of other options, but let's click on start. we are gonna actually come up with like, this is the screen, this is the main dashboard. We have the toolbar, we have here our welcome area. Then it's on the left side, you're gonna have like a tree where you're gonna start seeing the sites that you're gonna be scanning, or just a little bit of a breakdown of the pages that you actually scan. Then at the bottom, you're gonna actually kind of start seeing like step by step the actions that are happening, or a history of the processes that come up every time you do a scan. There are 3 modes, as you can see here. We have something that's called the safe mode, protected mode, standard mode, and then attack mode. Something like safe mode is when you are actually, you want to like run certain tests without being too aggressive. This is a penetration testing tool, so that's the reason why they actually provide these different modes. Because we're working with the tool locally, and in this case, my example is going to be locally, then we can actually go ahead and do like the standard mode. But you want to be in the safe mode when there's like, you only want the tool to go with the lowest level of scanning. You don't want to attack. Then protected mode is going to be the mode where you are actually going to do certain attacks, but you're actually setting up things within the context here where you're telling the tool to go or not go to certain URLs. So we have all these modes. Protected mode, we are actually going to be, for the demo, we will be clicking on the standard mode, and that will be the one we use. Just keep in mind, attack mode is the actual like most aggressive way to do a penetration testing on a web application. So let's start. We have the 2 modes, automated scans and manual explore. So we're going to actually run the automated scan first. We check the options. You have usually like, how do you want to run certain tools, what alerts, what tokens you want to actually use. And this tool is actually pretty helpful. Like, you will see that it gives you all of the descriptions for what to do, what are things used for, and what the options are. This one is actually an interesting option, and I like it a lot because with our Drupal applications, actually, there's times where we, like if we want to test a form and things like this, you can come to this form handler option and set up field names and then set the values. So you want to say, okay, for my email and for password, you want to use this. Right now, it's like we're using plain text just to test. You can test things like, am I using like admin? That most of the times when you go and set up something local, like when Drupal, we do it so quick sometimes that we end up doing like admin, but for username and password. Totally not accepted, right, for security reasons, but it's something that we can test right there. So this area, it's I wanted to point it out a little bit more because it's super easy to set up. You can just click on add and create the fields with the values that you actually want to test. Then they have things like HTTP sessions, the HUD that I'll be explaining in just a bit, how to use HUD. And so, it's literally out there. So when you click on these options right here, you will have the option to actually explore it. I definitely and highly recommend for you guys to download it and just start testing things. Right, it's I will say the download process sometimes it doesn't even take a couple, like 2 minutes or so. Okay, so we're gonna actually click on automated scan. I have the local copy of a Drupal 9.2.7 in here. We are gonna use that as the URL. Again, it's gonna be a local host. I am not running this tool on any live application. Again, I guess this could be like a good disclaimer now. It's like, you do not want to run this on a live site unless you have permission to do so, such as an ROE document, right? So again, locally, you have options. You can use a spider they provide. You can use things like Firefox headless. It's just going to run in the background. You're not going to see it. or you can use the actual Firefox. In this case, I'm using Firefox and use that browser. So when you click on attack, it's going to do like a quick scan of your Drupal application. It goes through some of the links. My local copy that I have here is super simple, literally just a standard installation. And so this is the site, right? So you're gonna see how the automated testing is gonna start going through the tests now that it already has all of the links. If there are files to download, you can choose to download if you want to keep a copy of things that the application finds, just to see what they are, right? At the beginning, I like to do that, or you can just cancel like you saw I did. It's gonna start testing things like entering comments into our feedback, and the tool just goes like that's one of the great things about using this tool. It's like it finds all the links, it finds these forms, it tries to start doing some penetration testing by itself. As you can see, like in here, I set up just very minimal configurations, almost like just the default. And you see in here how Drupal starts to behave also with the input validation and all of these type of tests. So it's super interesting. Again, it's gonna do this for a few times. It's gonna test different types of inputs. Maybe it will like start playing around with, let's see, usernames, passwords to try to actually break the login, creating a new account. So this goes on and on, depending on the size of your application. Like I said before, you're gonna end up um, running this for a few hours sometimes. But again, because this is locally, you can set up to only test this for a specific page. And you can definitely go in here and do a manual stop, right? So you can stop the attack manually. And as you can see, you start seeing like, this is the URL that you attacked. These are some of the steps that the application took. It actually gives you a little bit of a history right now. These are the active scans that happened. We have them by ID. There is a timestamp. And I think it's like a good exploratory exercise here where we start going through the application. We can see here the methods that are being used, and the URLs where they're being used, right? So if it's something that we didn't define and we just said, okay, just do this automated scan to the entire local site that I have, it's pretty small, so I'm confident that it's not going to take too long. So here we can actually see like, okay, what happened? And this was a post, so we try to post something there in like our search, so we can see things like a request that happened, something like the response as well. So you can even see fields and how this is actually handled. That's our request and response section. So sometimes it's easier when you actually visualize it. Again, like I said, you could have also run this in the background with the headless browser. Let's go to, so I'm gonna go all the way up, and you can see a little bit also. So these are just get methods. It actually goes and inspects our core. We're doing some search, still using the application, looking for users. Let's see over here. On the left side, you have what is called the tree view, where you actually see that's the directory that we were looking at, our local copy of Drupal 927. Some of the actions that happened, and we can then come down and take a look at the alerts. So you will see them breaking down. If there was anything high, it will be marked with red, and so those will be prioritized within your this list that you're seeing here in the alerts. Okay, we'll go in. Again, you can take a look and like individually check the alerts. In this case, this is something that you could set as a false positive, right? Because you're working locally. This small example, it's we're looking at the header of this GET request, and it's just saying, hey, this is a medium alert because you're actually leaking information using your application. So again, we know in security that we do not want to leak this kind of information where we're actually saying, oh, hey, by the way, we're using PHP 7.4.12. So right here locally, it's fine. But if again, this can be something that you can mark in your options uh, as as to ignore, right? Because it's just a local instance, so you don't need to actually worry about all of these specific alerts. Let's see. So we continue, just taking a look at the request and response. And again, there you can see that it even like gives us the Python version. There is something here pretty interesting that we like to use a lot, and it's called the policy manager. So the scan policy manager, you can set this up. Let me go back a little bit right here. If you go to your active scans and click on this icon on the left right here, you can bring up your policies. So if if within your company and the actually agency that you're working with Drupal, if you're actually looking for adding a specific policy, then this is the place to go. Within your active scan, you click that icon. It's going to bring the policies up. Um, you can go and check your default policy. You click on it, and you can click on modify just to see what's there, what they're working with. Again, this is default, so it comes with the application itself. You can actually go in and check each of these policies one by one. And as you can see, tests that happen there, path traversal, remote file inclusion. And so all of these are super important. You can also add your own policy. So in this case, just kind of name mine something like new policy for now. But you create your new policy, choose your categories. You can also choose threshold, attack strength, whether you want it slow, medium, high. And you can change it also individually per category. So we click OK. We actually are going to see it right here under our policy managers list with the name that we added. So if you have a specific policy you want to use, that will be the place to go. So now we're going to click and go quickly back to our options. We're jumping from the automated scan to the actual manual explorer. This one I actually like to do sometimes a little bit more because the automated scan actually goes through the entire site, right? The manual explorer is going to be pretty much you drive the entire process of testing. So you drop your URL there. In this case, again, I'm using the same site with localhost, and it's a Drupal 9.2.7. I'm launching it with the browser. And in this case, I'm enabling, it's called the HUD. As you can see, HUD stands for heads up display. So it is the exact same thing that you're going to see on the screen that is happening like in the back here on your application on the OWASP ZAP. So how it ends up bringing up like an entire set of tools. In this case, you can have the option to use a tutorial, but as you can see, all of these little options on the left and the right are actually what the main application has, but you're actually doing right on the browser, like right there. So you don't have to be out of there. So it brings up the browser, and then you can test and check things out. We can do like a quick search here. We're almost on time, but we can do a quick search. We're going to search with HUD in this case. And then you can see actually the history. HUD actually gives you all of these, the history right here, what happened with when you clicked on that and create the request of the search. So let's close this up. And we can come back here. We can check the history of what we did. You can see here, we can even see the alerts, active scans that happened when we just did it. We check the requests. We can also see where we went. We're gonna enable, we're gonna actually run this manual explorer without HUD now. So just Firefox. Let's launch that. So we're almost on time, but again, if there are any questions, you can kind of bring them up as we're going, and I can stop this. Um, this one is manually. We're not using HUD. I'm going to try to do a login in here. I'm going to actually test this and say, oh, let me test it with like if somebody just use a very weak username and password. Try to log in. Again, Drupal does a pretty good job in terms of handling that request. We go back. Let's go try to find this, and you can see actually how the request, like what it actually, like you can even see everything going back and forth between ZAP and the browser. Um, so let's go back to history. We go all the way down to our last post for, actually this one is the Arget, and I think it's the post, yep. And right here, you can see actually that we try to do for the username any and for the password any. And so that's what ended up like throwing us the forbidden, right? So you can actually see when you do these tests and run this. So it is very, very useful. And so because we're on time now, I'm gonna actually quickly run this, and I'm gonna show you how the report looks like. You can see the alerts right here. So you're gonna see when you run this type of test, you're gonna see alerts everywhere. So there's no reason to miss them. You either see them here, or you're gonna see them under the alerts tab, or you're even gonna see them all the way up in the tree area as well. So let me go and show you how the report looks like. When you want to produce a report of a test that you have ran, you can come up here to the top left. That will produce a report. You can in the scope, you're just gonna add a title, report name, the description. All of this is actually gonna be part of the report. So if you have a thorough description, I will definitely use it in here. Write it all out. Don't hesitate, because this is actually gonna be part of the report. You select some options. You have a pattern for names if you eventually just want to keep a pattern, because you're gonna be running multiple reports. So I'll keep going. Right now, let's say this is a ZAP scanning report for an ATO. Again, this is local, so we're not actually having this for an ATO, but it's just an example of how we can name it. Continue over here. I'm just gonna have the site, my local site, be included for this report. The other two here, as you can see, are actually sites that were used when we use the browser. So this tool will proxy through the browser. In this case, we use Mozilla, which was Firefox. And the signatures, because we actually have to create a local certificate to run this with no issues. It's all part of the process. Again, if you're new to it, you will see that ZAP has a pretty good documentation. Once you click on produce the report, this is what the reports look like now. They just recently run a contest, and their reports are super helpful. It used to not look like this, but now you can see they're super neat. They're really nice. Alerts, summaries, everything. You can click and go to things. Sites, you're gonna get certain risk levels, confidence levels, a summary. It is really nice, helpful, easy to read now. And yeah, if you go through this, you can actually see, you're gonna see that these have like, when you see the yellow for the report, you actually can click to it. It will actually take you to the specific vulnerability that it found, or like the alert. It will give you details. It will even give you ID for reference. You can go to like click on the links and go to those sites. Very, very helpful. Definitely a good way to actually start tracking your applications, testing your applications. And again, like I said, it's just being ahead of the game, right? Start including security testing early and as often as possible. So I think the more that you actually use the tool, the more you familiarize yourself with, you can see like it will start becoming like helpful. And again, as you start to become more used to this, you can actually implement it and automate this into your processes or workflows. So I hope you found this presentation helpful. I know we're just a little over, but we do want to leave some time for some Q&A. So yeah, thank you so much, and I'll be here to answer any questions you guys may have.
Paola, thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so anyone listening in, if you're in the hop-in, you can switch over to the Q&A tab and ask a question. Or if you are not able to get to that for some reason or another, feel free to just put your question in the chat and I will bring up that question. There's lots of gratitude in the chat for you, Paola.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone being here early, one of the first sessions of the first day of Drupal GovCon. So super exciting.
Yeah.
Can't wait to go and check out all the other presentations. But I appreciate everyone being here. And yeah, thanks so much.
Let's see. Going to hang out for a few minutes, see if there's questions.
Yeah, I'll be here. Absolutely.
I have a few questions. So what are your thoughts about some of the like OWASP ZAP SaaS providers out there that like kind of add some tooling around, like the underlying tool itself is open source and you can set it up yourself. And I was curious if you've had experience with any of the only one I'm familiar with is Stackhawk, but maybe there's other ones that are like that where you sign up for it and you get some of the automation there for you.
So the OWASP ZAP documentation actually provides a really good documentation, and it does gives you like a good. They have an API, so you can actually use that API. Like so, if you have a DevSecOps team, that probably will be like where you collaborate with the DevSecOps to start including this. But yeah, I mean, this application is so robust. In my opinion, for being like open source, it's definitely it definitely has tons of tools. And then there's also the marketplace where you can actually enhance other functionality if you don't see it within their main functionality that comes with the package.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And you mentioned a little bit about you wouldn't want to run this on a production site, which makes sense, except under certain scenarios. I was wondering if you could elaborate on what those scenarios might be. When would you want it on a production site, and what sorts of tests would you be running in production? Like, for example, you mentioned you highlighted how it was showing X powered by PHP on your local. You wouldn't want that happening in production. Do you actually set up commonly, like have a production test suite that would test for something like that?
So I will say, so again, the rules of engagement, that's the ROE document I was talking about. It's not that you cannot test it in live sites. So you can always do it again if you have those permissions and you have had everyone sign it, stakeholders are good to go. I guess also developers, the infrastructure team, they're all aware of these tests happening, or maybe not, depending on like sometimes pen testings you don't do them, you do them more on the fly too, but you do have to have permissions to do this on live sites. So that's the reason why I said like you want to use the tool to stay ahead. If you want to literally run it locally, like as a developer, me working on it, I could just go in, plug in one of the links where I'm actually developing and testing, and run OWASP ZAP right off my little like 5-10 minutes that I'm actually developing or writing a module or working with the module. I can just test it right there. Whether it is even a form that I'm implementing, I can just use it locally and test it. But yeah, the sites, like I would say, you do like also want to be prepared for things when they come to production. A lot of times, and now I've seen more with like cloud environments, the infrastructure of this of the cloud, like if you're using AWS, for example, they do already do some security measurements for your sites. So they are already in place. So things like, or even the providers, right? The SaaS providers, they should already have this in place. So it could be just a matter of like going and making sure that this information is not there. Like the one that I was showing, they was saying, okay, you're using the PHP version, this version. When you are actually running it in production, sometimes the infrastructure team or the developers for the SaaS application you're working with, they take care of that. But yeah, again, it's good to know and good to test. But you can also set it up so that you don't run into these alerts. So you don't get these alerts locally, because you know that locally these alerts don't really matter.
Gotcha. So it sounds like so like anything in production, it's something you just want to tread carefully and make sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, that makes sense. We do have a few questions in chat. So Hans asks, is there a plugin for Drupal specifically?
That's a great question. So I use the general testing suite because we are using a web application. Drupal is a web application. So there is, so again, this is open source. So I think we could, if there's not, then definitely go in and start writing one, right? Because that would be great. But I can throw in here the link, and you can find, because sometimes, because this is a web application, you will see that tests, regardless of the application, the tests are gonna be like, if you just need to penetrate or go through like an authentication penetration testing, is the same for all sites, right? But I am gonna leave the link in the chat for the add-ons marketplace, and you can actually check out everything that's available there for enhancements to the actual suite that comes with ZAP.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
thanks for the question.
If you're watching the video and for some reason the chat is not showing up, the address is aproxy.org/add-ons, all together in lowercase. Ray asks, can you customize individual test cases within the ZAP application or write your own custom test actions?
Yes, absolutely. You can do that. Again, there's a bunch of developers behind this. OWASP is supporting this, right? It's under the OWASP umbrella. They do also have a Slack channel. So if you haven't checked it out, you can go in there and ask questions about this. But definitely you can go ahead and create your own tests and customize testing for sure.
Great. How long does a typical test run take once you get, like on a typical Drupal site of, I don't know, average complexity, I guess?
Yes.
How long does the actual test run usually take?
It depends on like how big the site, but on an average, I will say you could be running the tool if you're like locally. You can exclude certain pages if you know that you don't need to test them. You could end up running this for a few hours. I'll say maybe 4 or 5. Again, you can use the browser that's headless so that the browser doesn't come up right in your face. It's like put the application on the side, run the test. You're running for a few hours, testing every single page. This is very thorough, depending on how you do it and how you set up the restrictions. But yeah, you can from like 2 to 3 hours to like up until the entire there. But again, you don't have to like be monitoring like constantly. You can let it run, go about your day, and then come back and check and see how things are, and even like pull out the report to see what came up.
Gotcha. So I guess taking a couple hours, I'm thinking about like a typical software delivery lifecycle. Where would you recommend having that testing be in the process, from like developer working on new work, and then at what point in that software delivery lifecycle would you recommend, okay, now we need to test all the new work that's been done?
Right. Yeah. So usually security has a history of like being almost the last thing people end up testing. The idea of using the SSDF framework is so that we actually start thinking about implementing this within the development process. So if it's a tool that's as easy as ZAP to use locally, I would even say we work with agile methodology. So I will say, you're working on your module, you're writing your module, you're putting this app before you even do like a commit for your code for one of your testing environments. Do the test locally and see what comes up, right? Because hey, it's easy to do. It may only take maybe an hour or two, or you can run it depending on the time. Also, sometimes resources and things like that would kind of have a difference. But yeah, you can definitely do this. I will say start implementing as early as possible in the process. And it can even be done as a developer. I feel like I would like to, like if I'm writing something, and again, it's the security mindset, the culture that we have to start kind of changing, where if I am developing an application, why not, if I think I know what I'm testing, why not test it right there? And then maybe even send it to our test engineers before we even push the code up.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Paola.
Yeah.
And it looks like we're at time. Is there, like, if folks wanted to learn more or wanted, do you all do consulting services to assist with this sort of work? Or, is there some way to reach out and get some assistance with stuff like that? Do you have any suggestions?
So we work with our federal partners. We do some, we have just started to get more and more into cybersecurity. The projects that we're working on are very specific right now to policy going through ATOs. But yeah, I mean, reach out, come to bigsoul.com, and yeah, we'll be happy to help and start a conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Paola.
Thank
and
you.
Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for the great questions.
Yes, thank you, everyone.